Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks! What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the CJRB Cutlery Rampart. For those of you who don't know, CJRB is basically I guess you'd say a subsidiary of Artisan Cutlery. Artisan Cutlery has their own kind of high-end and their own semi, budget line, and then CJRB seems to be specifically oriented to budget knives. But I very much enjoyed both Artisan Cutlery and CJRB Cutlery. They make a lot of stuff, and specifically in terms of CJRB Cutlery, they make some excellent knives for ridiculously low prices. So this knife, as well as many others, are actually down in my description if you want to check them out. Thank you so much to the Apex Pass-Run Group for sending this guide my way and CJRB Cutlery. And then also thank you to my generous patrons who are making continuous content possible. If you'd like to check out my Patreon, there is a link down in the description. The support would mean the world to me. Overall length of the Rampart coming in at 8 1/4. Excuse me, I'm itching my nose. From tip to scale on blade length, coming in at like 3.6 inches, and then your cutting edge is just shy of 3 1/4. Very generous forward choil there. How about some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1? Rat 1 is coming in at 8.6 inches overall, so very similar length there. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? PM2 coming in at 8.3 inches overall. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue coming in at 8 inches overall. And last but not least, the Spyderco Para 3. Spyderco Para 3 coming in at 7 1/4 inches overall. How's the action on this guy? Well, it's a CJRB, and as per usual with CJRBs, it's very good. This is a fall shut action, or very nearly fall shut action. It's mostly due to the weight of the blade, and CJRB does a great job of making sure that the tolerances are good enough on the inside to, where it'll do that without having any blade play, which this isn't the case, or it's the case here. There's no blade play. It's falls shut. It's, there's a little bit, it's like I always say, there's a difference between fall shut action on a budget knife and fall shut action on something like a Shearer Goroff. There's, you can feel the bearings in there. You can feel them passing over the steel surface of the liner. There's nothing wrong with that, but I want people to be able to distinguish between some of the excess that goes into a knife that's substantially more expensive, and then just having fall shut action on a budget knife. It's very, very good. It's very impressive. The detent is definitely tuned correctly. I'll let you guys take a look here. Click, nice. And the flipper tab has a good relationship between pivot, detent, and weight and mass of blade. So it's excellent. I mean, especially for the money, excellent. It's wonderful. I'm very, very happy with that. Let's go ahead and talk about, well, you know what? Let's do the hardware check first so I don't forget about it. Get out my handy dandy WIA magnetic driver and WIA bit selector, 2 items that are very inexpensive and extremely recommendable. You can find them down in the Amazon store that I reference at the beginning of every video. Just pull up in the store, look for knife maintenance, and these guys should be in there. Pivot's going to be T8, as per usual with CJRB. And body screws, I'm guessing, I always show this just so people know, T6, which is also pretty typical of CJRB. Yeah, T6. It's going to be that way on the pocket clip, and the screws on the other side, and there's another T8 over here. It's like I always say, T6 is not a deal breaker. I just wish it was T8, because then you'd just be using one bit. You wouldn't have to switch it out, and it'd be less likely to strip. Good tools and a steady hand will make sure that that doesn't happen, but just, be cognizant of that. Let's go ahead and talk about carry profile here. So thickness up against like the Para 3, it's a little thick. This is one of those CJRBs that doesn't have the, I don't know what happened there. This does have a good flipper tab. I just messed up. I'm not left-handed. CJRB has newer models that are contoured and I think are a little bit thinner on the G10. This is a lot like the Centros in that it's got some pretty thick G10 on it. Not necessarily a problem. I wouldn't call that a flaw with a knife. It's just going to be thicker than a knife like the Spyderco Para 3, which isn't necessarily a thin knife, right? So it's a little bit thick. And then in terms of carry profile length and height, up against the Spyderco PM2 and Para 3, 2 items or 2 knives that have very awkward carry profiles and nobody ever complains about. Nowhere near as tall, even considering the flipper tab. The flipper tab is large, but you can see there a lot of it is actually kind of tucked away inside this this angle here. So in terms of height, it's, I mean, even right here at its tallest point, still not as tall as the PM2 or Para 3 at their tallest points. It's about the same length as a PM2, and it's a little bit longer than the Para 3. Let's talk about weight on this guy. So the blade stock thickness is not thick, but not thin. Blade stock thickness, I'm going to guess 126 thousandths. So about the same as a Ritter Hogue or a Benchmade Griptilian. Weight on this guy, we are looking at, like I said, thick G10 scales, and then steel liners that are not thick but not thin, and there's no milling on the inside, and then a pretty heavy blade. So actually, it comes in pretty good. I was thinking it was going to be close. I thought it was going to be 4.75 ounces. 4 ounces is fine. No problem with that. If you're somebody who likes a super thin knife, you know, Benchmade bug out, or a super lightweight knife, you know, bug out or Para 3 lightweight, this may not be the knife for you. You know, it's thicker, it's longer, but it's not a difficult to carry knife. This is certainly within the realm of what I would consider to be normal, especially for me. I like knives that have a little bit more heft to them, so I like to carry knives between 4 and 6.5 ounces when I'm out and about doing whatever. So yeah, not really not a problem there at all. Did we cover everything? Wow, that was super fast. Weight, carry profile, action, hardware check. Yeah, we did all that. So let's go ahead and talk about the anatomy here. So first off, these do come in a wide variety of different colors, like a lot of CJRB knives. And then also, like Smoky Mountain Knife Works has the copper and brass. And those are cool, but they change the weight completely. Copper and brass are super heavy, and I like them, but as I found out with my Spyderco Manix 2, adding copper, it made it heavy enough to where I was like, yeah, it is kind of heavy, even for me, you know. So, you know, if you like copper and brass, and great. You know, as far as this review goes, I'm kind of reviewing it as its original form in G10. And that's the way that I would prefer it, honestly. On this one, we've got gray G10. Something that that CJRB and Artisan Cutlery do with a lot of their knives is they add a pivot collar. And sometimes the colors contrast really well, and sometimes they don't. For example, on the Artisan Cutlery Proponent, which I love, and it's brass, goes against everything I just said. But it's kind of, the idea there is to be this big, hulking, massive thing, right? So I don't mind it as much. Just as an enjoyer of overbuilt knives as the objects that they are, not necessarily hyper-utilitarian cutting tools. Anyways, sometimes those colors don't contrast well. For example, on that one, it was an orange pivot collar with brass, which looked funny to me. In this case here, and it's not the same way with all colors, we've got kind of a gold pivot collar contrasting with gray G10, which I think is really nice. I like that a lot. Very, very cool. It'll also work well, I think, with black G10. And then I think there's some other colors available. You can check them all out down here in the description. That's really, really cool. This is peel ply textured. It's a little bit more aggressive than like on a Spyderco. You can actually see the texturing is just bigger and more aggressive. In and out of your pocket over and over and over again, yeah, it's going to fray your jeans a little bit, but that's not that big of a deal. It does provide good, secure grip on a knife that, you know, doesn't have a lot of... the lines in the ergonomics are good, but they're not allowing you to hold on to the knife without the texturing. The texturing, I think, is necessary because there's just nothing... I mean, this is straight right here, so there's nothing keeping you. There's no, you know, curvature back here like on a Spyderco Para 3 that might keep your hand from slipping off of it. So the texturing is very welcome on this design. So I like that. Everything is, of course, nicely rounded off. CJRB does a good job of that. There's nothing sharp or angular here. The blade is made of D2 steel, which is perfectly welcome in this price range. Absolutely. Not quite a stainless steel, but good enough, unless you know, live on or near the ocean. These are made in China. It does say China on the blade. That's something that I wish, you know, it's like, we know it is. We're buying it. There are some other Chinese manufacturers who don't put that on the blade, and I kind of like that. It's just something. It's just the less that's on the blade in general is good. The only time that I like it or that I don't mind it is when it says USA, but that's because I'm from the USA. So I guess, you know, you don't have to you know, take my word as law there. I don't mind the CJRB logo on this side. I don't like the serial, like the serial number in the China. I could do without that. Just the CJRB and D2, that'd be plenty. I love the tumbling that CJRB does in their knives. I love that. I love tumbled finishes. I'm biased. I feel like, especially in the budget knife world, and I said this on the Centros as well, we see so many satin finished D2 blades. These are blades that people are buying because they're going to use them. Yeah, there's people who collect CJRBs, right? But if I buy a CJRB, I'm going to use it. These, I mean, they make excellent user models. They're good with ergonomics. They're good with materials. They're excellent with prices. So something that's nice about the tumbling is it'll hide those wear marks, right? And also, I mean, if you don't care about the wear marks, the other benefit is it naturally knocks down the lines or the corners that would otherwise be a little bit sharp. That's the biggest issue that I have with a lot of the budget satin finished blades, is that they're kind of sharp up here. They'll kind of skin your fingernails back a little bit, which isn't that big of a deal. But, you know, if you're cutting or bracing on the back of the knife, it can be kind of, it's still angular enough to where I guess if you are using a ferro rod, you'll be just fine. It's a big, chunky Wharncliffe blade. Lots of strength out here, lots of material out towards the edge. It's not just the thickness, but the height, you know, how much height the material's down here. I mean, obviously, it's still not a knife that I would stick into something and pry with, but it's going to be a lot more durable than, say, the tip on a Spyderco PM2 or Para 3. So I like that. The edge is a nice, nicely done. It's perfectly sharpened. There's no issue there. It's not an absolute laser beam, but it does get fairly thin behind the edge, you know, perfect for EDC. You're not going to have an issue with that. The best thing I think about blades like this is being able to, grab the knife like this and do your draw cuts. That's something that I really like. There's still enough of a tip to do your puncture style tasks. There's no belly. It's just a straight edge. It's going to be easy to sharpen, but your slicing tasks are not going to be done, you know, as efficiently as, you know, with a knife like this that's got belly, you know, your slicing curvature. But that's no big deal. There's different reasons to use different blade styles, different blade shapes, and this one is going to do all of your general EDC tasks, no problem, right? You don't necessarily need exactly the right blade shape for, you know, the exact task that you're doing, so I don't have a problem with that. I very much like the forward choil here. It is a larger than normal choil, but it's still at best a second knuckle choil, meaning you can't choke all the way up on it without risking running up on the blade, and that's because there's a flipper tab here, but it's good enough. I have no problem with that. The jimping back here is functional, but it's still fairly smooth, so you can lock into it a little bit, but you'll slip around. Not really that big of a deal. I like the flipper tab. You can, it's pretty much, I mean, it's kind of in between push button and light switch. You're kind of at an angle, right? So you light switch it, and you can kind of push button it, but it's a lot easier to just approach it from right here. You do kind of run your finger into this right here, and it's not sharp or anything. It just doesn't feel quite as natural as if the landing zone were perfectly flat. It's fine though. It's a minor nitpick. It's no big deal. There is no double clutch. The knife falls perfectly into position here, and it passes, even though I don't know that it has a real detent ramp, but it passes over the blade very, very easily. You can see there, I slipped off of it a little bit. That's going to happen sometimes because of the angle and nature of it. It's not, again, it's not that big of a deal. It's just something that's going to happen sometimes. Like I said, the G10's thick. I think it's a little unnecessarily thick. I think it could come down. It could almost be half of that, and it would be a lot better. Something that I would prefer, I mean, and I feel like CJRB might just be doing this. They seem to be contouring a lot of their newer blades. The Feldspar is it's a great example. I actually don't have that one in hand yet, but man, that contour G10 that they're doing, and actually I do have, if I can find it, I've got another, yeah, this one right here. I'll give you an example. The Agave is something that I've got in hand, and it's an example of what they're doing. And I think these run a little bit more, understandably, but this right here, oh, it's wonderful. They've got contoured G10, and they've got a cartridge liner underneath. And that's great, because then you still get the benefit and strength of the liner. It's sunk into the G10, so they can still have reasonable thickness of G10 that's reinforced by the liner in a more meaningful way. And then you get contouring on the scales, which is nice in hand. It feels good, it fills the hand, but it doesn't feel unnecessarily thick. Rest assured, though, I still don't consider this a problem. It's just something that, you know, they've done better in some other models. No big deal. Pocket clip is mountable on both sides, so right or left-handed, though this is a right-hand liner lock, so if you're left-handed, you'll have to manipulate kind of like this, but it's no big deal. I mean, you can adapt to it. If you're left-handed, I'm sure you've dealt with that before, because we live in a right-handed knife world, let's be honest. But it's nice that it's mountable on either side. You've got two simple standoffs and two screws. I think that's fine. You've got a lanyard hole that is unfortunately prioritized way above the pocket clip. There's still not a lot of this knife sticking up. There's not. But truthfully, I would just rather the lanyard hole wasn't there. I know there are still people out there who like lanyard holes and like to attach a lanyard, but most of us aren't. So if it wasn't there and the pocket clip were a little higher, it'd be better. It's not a big deal as it sits right here. CJRB's deep carry clips are okay. I'm not the biggest fan of this right here, this bill that sort of comes up and sticks out. These will snag on things, and they're steel, so they'll likely snap if it does catch on something. And considering where you're likely to be using this knife, which is for anything because of the build quality and how much it costs, right? This is a knife that people are going to definitely use. So you're going to have it attached to your side when you're out working, you know, whether you're doing simple tasks or you're out, you know, near a fence or anything that it could get caught on. Yeah, it's probably going to get caught. You know, most of the time it'll bend a little bit and you can just bend it back down. It's not a big deal. I just prefer pocket clips like this that don't stick up as much. I mean, that's titanium, but yeah, it's not that big of a deal. Like I said, the peel ply texturing is going to catch your pocket a little bit. Not that big of a deal. The pivot on the other side is the same. I don't know if there's a D-shaped barrel on the inside or not, but these are pretty easy to adjust. And I generally don't have an issue with a free spinning barrel on CJRBs. The tolerances are good, right? So you shouldn't have to worry about that. Engagement here is, it looks like about 60%, and the blade is centered, which is great. And on this guy, we have minor blade play, but I bet if we just make a small adjustment here real quick, because I have been flipping this guy a lot, and that's going to happen if you buy a knife, you know, and actually prices that, oh, you know what? It actually is leaning over just a little bit. Let's give that a turn. Okay, action's still good. And yeah, there you go. Okay, so that was it. Centering now, what are we looking at? Yeah, now the centering is good. I must have come at that at an angle. It's a good point to make. When you're looking at, this is off topic, but if you're considering buying a knife on the secondary market, people will always, if the centering's off, they will slightly angle the camera and the knife so that the tip looks centered. You have to look at where the liners are, where the shadows of the liners are underneath, so you can decide, is the camera angle straight on? You don't want to be seeing any liner on either side if you're judging perfect centering on the aftermarket. You know, people do that. I hate it. People do it, definitely. They'll always claim it's an accident, but it's not. They know what they're doing. Anyways, side rant, but yeah, centering's good, and in this case now the blade locks up absolutely fine. No issue there. Action's good. I mean, there's a lot of good here. Things that I don't like and things that some people might not like. Again, the scales are a little bit thick. It's kind of unnecessarily thick. T6 screws, it's not that big of a deal. In some colors, the pivot color might look more or less appropriate. But that's an eye of the beholder thing. What was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, the pocket clip is, it's not my favorite pocket clip in the entire world. No big deal. Flipper tab is pretty good. I mean, the detent's certainly good. The action's good. The way that you approach it is a little bit awkward, and the shape of it's a little bit awkward, but it still works. You know, it's just sort of coming down on that corner. But, you know, overall, no big deal. Here's the main thing. This is why I'm kind of rushing through a lot of this stuff and breezing over a lot of it. Once again, with CJRB knives, the best thing about them is the price. Regardless of the shape of things or the form that it takes, what they usually get right is a good ergonomic design, good materials, and they fit together in a way that, you know, is really impressive. Really, really impressive considering this is a $30 to $35 knife. Yeah, I can recommend this 100%. CJRB just does, they do it right. If you want a good budget knife, I mean, yeah, they're not made in the United States. And I know, you know, people right now are kind of, there's people, you know, much more strongly, they have a much stronger opinion about purchasing things from China. You know, people are going to do what they're going to do. I'm not going to, you know, tell you guys exactly how I feel about that because it's not really important. People are here for the knife review. You know, if you're interested in the knife, you probably already know that it's made in China, right? And people are going to make that decision for themselves. As far as the knife goes and what you're getting for the money, it's very, very recommendable. $35 for this construction, this shape, you know, D2 steel and G10. It's a pretty common form, but it's great. And it's still like $10 to $15 under what other people are calling, you know, exemplary budget knives. You know, Civivi and Bestech kind of hover around the $50, $55 mark. And CJRB is at the $35 mark. So yeah, 100%. You can pick this up down in my description. 100% recommended. It'll go on my Cheap Knives I Like playlist and my Most Recommended Knives playlist. Thanks again, Apex Fast Riding Group and CJRB for sending this guy along. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this metal complex logo right here and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.